Further debate? I'll recognize the member for Oshawa.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and I am pleased to have the opportunity again to stand in this House and get the official record of the official opposition on the official record for Bill 257. And Speaker, this is the Supporting Broadband Expansion Act that we had a lively debate about at second reading. We had a lively committee process. And Speaker, I know that you weren't able to attend, but it is up on my YouTube if you'd like to see the official opposition's presentation for Schedules 1 and 2, because I think it's very important that folks know where the NDP stand on broadband. We have always stood, not just in this House, but stood up across our communities for access to strong services, to broadband access to those in the rural, northern, remote, agricultural communities. And actually, to that point, Speaker, we did introduce a few amendments, spoke, I would say, at length and with passion, standing up for areas of the province that have always gotten the short end of the stick. And I would say that, that stick is only because they grow them, Speaker. It isn't because any government that I have seen has given them what they need or are due. So the broadband expansion, we certainly want to see the last mile, the unserved, the underserved folks across the province in northern, rural, remote areas to actually have broadband. So we hope that while we've heard that that is the government's intention, I'll believe it when I see it, Speaker. That's why we wanted it in writing, in legislation. We tried. We put up a good fight, and the government defeated that. They say it's for all Ontarians, not just rural. We'll hear again about their intentions, I'm sure, but wishing it does not make it so. So there's a lot that will remain ahead of us. But that's Schedules 1 and 2, Speaker, and we voted on the record for those schedules. We want to see broadband. But what I'm going to take the bulk of the time today to discuss is Schedule 3. And this should surprise no one. I represent Oshawa, but oftentimes the issues from across Durham region land in our inbox, and folks reach out to our office. And one of the issues is a local one in the broader Durham region is the wetland at Duffins Creek. So there's been a lot of attention, a lot of conversation, and I'm not going to get into the weeds. Oh, get it? Okay. But I'm not going to get into it about the wetland and the importance of those weeds and phragmites and the wetland ecosystem that is so important in the province of Ontario, but globally speaking. Interesting, Speaker, that here in Ontario, we had a wetland on the chopping block when we also have such concerns about flooding, when we have such concerns about blue-green algae, when wetlands serve an unbelievable purpose. Maybe that's the problem, because it's such an unbelievable, such an unbelievable thing that they accomplish. Maybe that's why the government doesn't believe it. I don't know. Because if they did believe it, I can't imagine that they would have let it be in the sites of developers. You look at Ohio, for example, Speaker, just something worth everyone's time. The H2 Ohio initiative is creating wetlands, is strengthening wetlands, is investing truckloads of money, not truckloads of asphalt to pave one, but literally to create them and protect them. It'd be great if this government came forward with an H2 Ontario program. I challenge them to do that, but instead we have a minister, the Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry, who is in charge of the flooding strategies in Ontario, and it was his signature on the permit to pave the wetland. And I cannot reconcile those two things at all. And maybe he can't either. I can't speak for him, but I was here when he said, if we don't like Schedule 3, whatever the exact wordings were, just pretend it's not there. And that was the day that he ripped it physically out of, with great flourish, ripped out the schedule from the bill. Unfortunately, Speaker, that was not foreshadowing anything. That was not a sign of what was to come, because at committee we gave them the opportunity. The government did not remove Schedule 3 from the bill. And had they done that, that would have been awesome. Because a lot of folks are very concerned about Schedule 3. I'd like to kind of break it down for the folks at home, and it's fairly technical, so if I oversimplify, you'll have to forgive me, but the government is going to likely, I could be wrong about this, we'll just see how debate goes, but from what we heard earlier in the debates and at committee, I imagine the government is going to stand and speak about MZOs, and either the value of MZOs, they'll talk about certain local examples of MZOs, and they'll talk about partnerships with municipalities, what have you about MZOs. Okay, so this particular bill in Schedule 3 is not about the merit of MZO use. It is about the fact that if an MZO, a minister's zoning order, is indeed utilized by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, if he issues an MZO, for whatever reason, whoever's behest, if he orders an MZO, Schedule 3 makes it like a supercharged weapon, more than I would argue an MZO already can be, depending on the circumstances. Now we have that the MZO doesn't have to consider the Provincial Policy Statement, the PPS, and the Provincial Policy Statement. I'm going to share with folks is basically the building code for the Planning Act. So you think of the building code and that it ensures that your home is safe and sound and that you know what you're getting and that you can sleep at night knowing that you've bought something that meets that standard. So the PPS is essentially the building code for planning. Okay, it's not just about the environment. It's about all of the things. So, and the most recent statement of provincial policy, the most recent provincial policy statement came into effect May 1st, 2020. That's not a long time ago. That's since we've had the folks across the way. Okay, the PPS reflects their druthers, so to speak. It's recent. Okay, but the PPS, the three sections here, building strong and healthy communities, about Ontario's long-term prosperity, environmental health, social well-being, depend on wisely managing change and promoting efficient land use and development patterns. It goes on. Another section, wise use and management of resources. Ontario's long-term prosperity, environmental health, and social well-being depend on conserving biodiversity, protecting the Great Lakes, and protecting natural heritage, water, agricultural, mineral, and cultural heritage, and archaeological resources for their economic, environmental, and social benefits. Ain't nothing wrong with any of that. Section 3, protecting public health and safety. Ontario's long-term prosperity, environmental health, and social well-being depend on reducing the potential for public cost or risk to Ontario's residents from natural or human-made hazards. Okay, so the PPS, we can all get, I thought, we could all, get on board with that, and we have for a very long time. It's the foundation of planning. So what we have here, and I'm going to raise some issues that came up in committee, Speaker. I'll speak, if I have time, a little bit more about how the committee process unfolded. But EcoJustice is representing Ontario nature and environmental defence in a lawsuit against, wait for it, this government, okay, about the Duffins Creek situation, about their issuing of an MZO, and they are arguing that that was unlawful because it basically went against the provincial policy statement. Okay, the provincial policy statement, or PPS, says, protect and don't do harm and factor things in, and they're saying that the MZO issued at Duffins Creek violated that. So the folks from EcoJustice said, quote, the judicial review challenges the minister's issuance of an MZO in contravention of the requirements of the Planning Act in the lower Duffins Creek provincially significant wetland, like I said. Here's how they explain Schedule 3. Schedule 3 of Bill 257 would purport to legitimize past unlawful decisions of the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, including those raised in the above ongoing litigation. It does so by attempting to legitimize the unlawful approval of past MZOs under the Planning Act, where those MZOs were not consistent with the PPS. by altering the rules to shield the minister's exercise of discretion to order an MZO after the fact. Schedule 3 of Bill 257 operates to restrict access to the courts in respect of any past unlawful decisions of the minister. They go on to say, Schedule 3 of Bill 257 would replace the rule of law with the rule of the minister. It would also purport to legislate the outcome of an ongoing court case. Access to the courts is, under the rule of law, one of the foundational pillars protecting the rights and freedoms of our citizens. End quote. I mean, they provided us with a lot of good understanding, and I wonder what has driven this government to put this schedule in, because we heard from folks, and I'll raise some of their concerns, calling for the government, AMO, the OFA, they called for the government to withdraw Schedule 3. Because everybody wants a planning, I'll say regime, a planning situation that they can count on. You know, everybody wants to know what the rules are. And this particular schedule says, okay, you know what, yeah, it was a protected, provincially significant wetland. We can't change the classification, or maybe that's too cumbersome, I don't know, that was the original plan, it seemed like. And they weren't able to change that it was protected, so let's just say we don't have to protect it anymore. Yeah, okay, it's still provincially significant, but meh, so what? The PPS doesn't apply if the minister uses an MZO. It doesn't have to. And those parts deemed never to have applied, deemed never to have. That is retroactive. And the thing is, you know, we talk about changing the rules mid-game. What we have here is changing the rules after the game has been played. And this is, you know, this is a clear example of mixing our systems, that we have the legislative side of things, we're a part of that, and the judicial side of things. We're not supposed to be a part of that, Speaker. And so here, this is where the lawyers have laid out that it's very concerning that changing the law could change the outcome of a court case that we're in the middle of. That's not okay. That's not okay at all. Speaker, another piece to this is that that the EcoJustice folks have said is that Bill 257 has other constitutionality problems too. It attempts to undermine both statutory and constitutional consultation duties owed to First Nations. These duties are confirmed in the PPS and Planning Act. I'd say that the government's on shaky ground, except that they've got the pen and they're able to change the laws. Like, it was shocking when we first read this, but then hearing from folks at committee and really understanding just how shocking it is, the potential here is not a small thing. There is really big potential for harm to be done across the province, long-term harm. You know, I'm not going to belabor the point about the importance of wetlands. We all took biology in school. We should have the basics, right? We've heard it over and over again. Certainly people came and spoke eloquently at committee. We heard from Environmental Defence, from Ontario Nature. You know, the value of on the environmental side is massive. But I'm going to share, so speaking to the constitutionality that EcoJustice raised, I wanted to share some words from Chief Kelly LaRocca of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation when she came before committee. As she had said, quote, and this is on behalf of the Williams Treaties First Nations. These concerted attacks on long-standing planning principles transgress our rights as a First Nation and the rights of communities throughout Ontario. Schedule 3 of this proposed legislation shows that the province has chosen to yet again contravene its duty to uphold the honour of the Crown through meaningful consultations with First Nations. Schedule 3 would directly affect an MZO that impacts lands that fall within our traditional and treaty territories. The Williams Treaties First Nations have and continue to exercise our constitutionally recognized treaty harvesting rights within the lands and waters of the Duffins Creek watershed. Despite these impacts, MSIFN and the Williams Treaties First Nations were not consulted prior to the tabling of this legislation. Through its actions, the government has made it unequivocally clear to us that it has no interest in respecting its constitutional duties as found in Section 35. Instead, it views our concerns as something which can be disregarded and bypassed by legislation hidden in a broadband expansion bill. We heard that a fair bit at committee, Speaker. It was interesting, actually. I think it was the committee member from Peterborough South who had an involved conversation back and forth. But one of the things that he said was that, the duty to consult could be simplified, and was sort of suggesting ways it might be simplified. That is not for him or this government or anybody else connected to colonial power to decide what should or shouldn't be involved in the consultation process. Like, it was offensive and highly problematic, if indicative of the values of this government, frankly. Anyway, but I'm going to go on and let the words be from the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nations. Schedule 3 is a severe overreach of government powers and a desperate attempt to avoid accountability after violating existing provincial policies. The retroactive nature of the proposed legislation is not designed to satisfy the needs of Ontarians, but instead to allow the government to skirt responsibility for issuing an illegal MZO, which was contrary to a provincial policy statement. Like, people came to committee and they showed up for the environment, for the province, for families, for the well-being of future generations. The Haudenosaunee Development Institute also presented at committee, and a really excellent, full, comprehensive submission, but I'm just going to pull some highlights now. And they represent the interests of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy Chiefs Council in land planning processes and the development of lands within Haudenosaunee jurisdiction. They called for this government to strike Schedule 3. Schedule 3 of Bill 257 poses a serious threat to Haudenosaunee rights and sovereignty and must be struck in its entirety from Bill 257. They have said, as noted by the Supreme Court of Canada, the government may not simply adopt an unstructured discretionary administrative regime which risks infringing Aboriginal rights in a substantial number of applications in the absence of some explicit guidance. But here we are, right? Here we are, fighting after the fact for this government to withdraw Schedule 3 because it's wrong on every level. I get it. It's a shield for the minister, for the government, the judicial review or lawsuit that they're facing. This would make it all like, shh, never happened. That's a massive power. When you turn on your tap, you expect the water to be safe, clean, inspected, all that stuff, right? When you buy a house, you expect it not to be on a floodplain. All of those things that have to do with the Provincial Policy Statement. Like I said, the building code of planning, the fundamentals. But now, if the government, if the minister says we want to fast-track a development, but don't worry, we're not going to consult, we don't have to abide by the terms of the Provincial Policy Statement, we don't have to factor in flood mitigation, we don't have to, just get her done. Well, guess what? We're going to be on shaky ground or wet ground. Speaker, we had two young people come before the committee. Last presentation of the day. Devin and Allie, and they've been very active. I'm quite impressed by an 18 and now 19-year-old who, and not to diminish them based on their age, but as they laid out that they're juggling a lot and they are doing a lot and it really matters. And I'm not going to try to quote Devin right now, but they had made it clear that they are glad to do the work of advocacy, but they don't think that they should have to, right? That you have a government that's supposed to be a leadership body that's supposed to make decisions in the best interests of the province, and they put clearly on the record that that is not what they think is happening. They had a very challenging time at committee, and you know what? I'm hearing someone say that they were attacked. I will say that they defended themselves really, really, really well. Like, they were an inspiration, and the government was holding, was going pretty full force at them to, I think, take up the time, really. But anyway, the government can tell their side of that story. But it was a weird thing to watch. Here were these people who came before committee, not even young people, just people came to committee to share their views and ended up in kind of a back and forth with, whose life was tougher or who has a longer resume. It was really strange. But anyway, really impressed by them. And Speaker, they continue to do that work on behalf of their generation and neighbours. And they laid out a lot of things that they would like to see from the government in terms of that green leadership, environmental leadership. So, Speaker, some of the things that I had referenced earlier, the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, as of March 29th, they put out a statement, and I'll share it with the government because I know that they've heard it, but I want the members in the House here today who weren't at committee, I want them to know that, the farmers, the municipalities, they've come out and said, don't do this. OFA is unable to support amendments to the Planning Act that would give the minister or any other planning authority to make planning decisions which are not consistent with the Provincial Policy Statement. OFA believes the PPS does not go far enough in protecting our finite agricultural lands. OFA recommends strengthening of the PPS to require fixed urban settlement boundaries and policies requiring mandatory intensification within existing built urban areas as well as mandatory greenfield density requirements. OFA has concerns that giving the minister the ability to issue MZOs that are not consistent with the PPS is short-sighted. I'm going to say that again for effect. Short-sighted, and could foster bad planning that cause either individuals or government to incur the cost of dealing with poor outcomes later. But you guys need a shield for the minister right now, huh? So come heck or high water, and there will be high water. Speaker, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and they talk about the MZO as a tool, okay? They talk about it as a tool, kind of explain when it may or may, when it has been used historically, but they also note here it excludes public consultation and is unappealable. So even on a good day, an MZO is hidden behind closed doors away from the public. Already a problem. But this, and this is now quoting from AMO, with this proposed amendment, Ontarians can no longer be assured of an outcome that reflects the balance of priorities that the PPS would require, and it may make some members of the public question the reasons behind declaring provincial interest in the statement in the first place. As a result, we would recommend that the province reconsider this schedule and choose to lead the planning process through example to ensure confidence in our planning system is maintained broadly." End quote. And the government said, oh, right, they said nothing. But they didn't do it, and they had that chance. Speaker, all of this has been on the record time and time again. I made it clear in the legislature. My colleagues eloquently spoke about this from the conservation standpoint, from the municipal affairs and housing standpoint. Committee, we put it there again. We had folks come from all across Ontario, all ages. What I didn't read here today were all of the individual submissions. There were folks who are just folks that have been following along, which is encouraging, but also worrying that they, when they're tuning in, they're seeing this, they're very concerned. Just folks who know that this is an unbelievable overreach. So, Speaker, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to just leave this with a quote from Devon and Alley in the letters that they have written. They've said, "On behalf of the future generations of Ontario, we ask that you change your ways before it is too late. Become leaders of sustainable change rather than leaders of concrete and sprawl. Time is running out. In order to ensure a livable future for ourselves and generations to come, we need your government to start prioritizing the environment and protecting Ontario's green spaces. After all, it's yours to discover, not yours to destroy." Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you.